Isn't it funny how a product becomes so successful, its name becomes just the sort of like synonymous go-to name for the whole market sector? In other words, when my wife asks me to vacuum the house, which she does quite a lot, she asks me to hoover the carpet. We don't own a Hoover though. Our vacuum cleaner is made by a company called Vax, but the name Hoover is so synonymous with vacuum cleaners, it just defines that sector. And if you go to somewhere and somebody says, would you like a can of Coke? Now, they're not necessarily going to give you a Coca-Cola. They'll may give you sort of like a supermarket's own brand, but again, Coke has become synonymous with that genre of soft drink. And do you call sticky tape by any other name other than sellotape? And so it is with vans, because when you go and hire a large van from somewhere, and they say, what kind of van do you want? You say, well, I'll have a Transit, please. Because the name Transit is synonymous with this size and style of van, irrespective of the product you end up driving. The Transit is as British as a bacon and egg sarnie washed down with a cup of tea. And now it's gone electric. Welcome to this week's van review. Welcome to the new Ford e-Transit. And as always, welcome to AutoEV. Now, before we get on to this week's van review of the new Ford e-Transit, it is of course that time where I ask you to make sure you're subscribed to the AutoEV channel. Once you do that, make sure you press the little bell button down below, because then you're notified of when our next video goes live. Once you've watched the video, if you do enjoy it, make sure you give it a thumbs up and leave us some comments down below, good or bad. Let us know how we're doing and let us know your thoughts on the vehicles that we review. Now, since 1965, the Transit has pretty much been, as I say, the bastion of the roads of Britain. It's not too flippant to use the word icon when it comes to this van. And it's not just tradespeople that have benefited from the Transit's capabilities. It's thought at one stage 90% of all bank robberies in the UK used the Transit as its getaway vehicle, such was its car-like ability. Rock bands have toured in them. Children have been born in the back of them as ambulances and then grown up to buy ice creams out of them as ice cream vans. Cars are fixed at the side of the road by them by the tools that are kept in them. Houses are built by the materials that are carted around in them. It is such an important vehicle to us in Britain. In fact, in Ford in Britain, it is our version of the F-150 pickup that they have in the US. Such is the importance of the Transit. But it's because the Transit is so important to Ford that it is vital that they get the electric one right. You see, with some of the vans that we've tested, well, we've had pretty much mixed reviews about them. And if you're not really relying as a company on your light commercial vehicle business side of the business being successful, then you can maybe kind of get away with a slightly below par product. But when it's as important as the Transit, you can't. So, is it any good? Well, the only way that we can tell is by putting it through the road test that actual vehicle buyers decide to trust when it comes to delivering a true verdict. And of course, that's the AutoEV one. So let's take a deeper dive into the new e-Transit and find out what it's like. Okay, we'll start with styling. Now, I've said before, styling's maybe not such a hugely important thing when it comes to commercial vehicles, but remember, this is still representing your business, so it has to look smart enough because it's saying something about you. This is the first thing that people will see when you turn up to build their extension or to deliver their parcels or something, or whatever their business is that you do. They're going to see your van, so it needs to look right. And it is, well, it's a Transit. They haven't changed the outside of it in any way, so it is familiar to everyone. The only way you can tell it's the e-Transit is because you get this electric blue fill in the sort of grille slats here. Of course, there's no actual grille there. The cooling's done underneath there. This is all just kind of blanked off. But of course, you get the blue flashes there. Now, you've got your charging flap at the front of the nose, which I think is the best place for it on a van, because if you've watched our Fiat e-Ducato review, where it's down the side of the van, you can't get into a charging bay properly when it's down the side, such are the size of these vehicles. So that's the place to put it. So we're off to a good start. Of course, you get the nice kind of big prominent sort of like headlights here, good practical big plastic front bumper, parking sensors down below. And I have to say, I quite like it in this sort of like matte kind of grey colour. Well, it's not matte, but this kind of non-metallic solid grey. It looks quite smart. But yeah, typical Transit, so what you see is what you get. Now, as you'd expect with Ford, you do get a choice with the Transit in terms of body styles. In fact, there are about 25 variations you can have, depending obviously on your business needs. Now, we'll come on to battery sizes and things such as later. But basically what you have here, if you go for the panel van, is you get a choice of 2 roof heights, either H2 or H3. This is an H2, so it's medium height roof. And then you also get a choice of 3 lengths, which is either L2, L3 or L4. This particular one is an L3, which is a longer wheelbase. So it's longer wheelbase, long wheelbase, medium height roof on this particular one. You can also specify as a chassis cab, so you can put things like drop side tippers, flatbeds on, or whatever else you sort of like need to coach build onto the back of that. But we're just going to discuss obviously the panel van for what we've got here. Down the side, well, there are 2 trim levels available. This is the higher of the 2 trims, and it's called Trend, which means you get steel wheels with a nice kind of wheel trims on them. You get very practical kind of plastic kind of rubbing strip down the side. So 1 sliding door, which is obviously on the near side of this van, where you've got quite a high step into, but we're going to discuss practicality in a second, but other than that, that's okay. But yeah, good looking van from here. Now around the back, obviously you've got your tall double doors that split down obviously down the centre, high mounted rear brake light. The rear tail lights, they're just the way they kind of just wrap round the sides there with this nice kind of crease down the middle. I really like that, and again it's very little intrusion into the actual load bay. Nice low bumper there for you to step up into, and there's still some protection, the cladding on the backs of the doors, and of course you get your parking sensors round at the front and on the rear as well, with an easily accessible tow hook on the back. And a bit like the front, the only way you can tell that it's the electric Transit is by the E badge with this blue flash through it. That's it. Good looking van, as I say. It's a standard Transit. You know, if you know Transit, then you know what it is. It's not going to give you any surprises in terms of the way that it looks. But what do you think? Is it good enough? Should Ford have done something a little bit different? Should they have pushed the boat a little bit further? Of course, as always, let us know in the comments down below. Now, like I said, the e-Transit is available with 25 different variations depending on your needs. The dimensions that we'll give you will be for the one that we have on test. But let me run you through some of the different heights and lengths that are available. So there's 2 heights available, either an H2 or an H3, medium height or high roof. The one that we have is the medium height van. Now, in terms of length, you either have the L2, which is the medium wheelbase, the L3 long wheelbase, which this one is, or the L4, which is long wheelbase extended length. Okay, and as I say, it is available as a chassis cab as well. But as I say, the dimensions we're going to give you are for this one, which is an L3 H2. Okay, lovely. 2 rear doors, and they open up as such. Now, you can actually open them further than this. You can actually, just by flicking this little lever here, they will go up to 180 degrees, meaning obviously you can get back right up to a load bay. But the other nice little thing with those little locks there is you can also lock the doors in place when they're like this, just by flicking them the other way. So in other words, if the wind comes along and you're just getting in the back and out, they're not going to close in on you, which is a really nice touch. You've got quite a high step up, in fairness. Of course, you've got the bumper, which you use as your step, and then you're into your load bay, which has got this moulded lining, which is really nice, and obviously this one is ply lined as well. In terms of lashing points, well, there's 4 eyes down either side of the van. On this near side, because you've got the step, that lashing point is on the step, so that's the only difference. And then, of course, on the rear bulkhead, the standard steel bulkhead, you've got 2 lashing points there, so there is quite a bit to be getting on with. Now, dimensions, what are we looking at? Okay, so your maximum loading width is 1,565 millimeters, and that's between the doors. And the maximum load height, so from here to the top of the door in this particular van, is 1,648 millimeters. Now, those increase obviously as you get inside the van, and the width the height goes up to 1,786 millimeters inside it, and the maximum width between the sides is 1,784 millimeters, and that will drop to 1,392 millimeters between the wheel arches at the back there. Your load bay length from the rear doors to the bulkhead at floor height is 3,533 millimetres on this long wheelbase van. Now, the other thing that you can have fitted to the rear of this, which is a really handy thing, is what Ford call the Pro Power on board. And that is effectively 2 electrical sockets mounted here that are capable of delivering up to 2.3 kilowatts of electric power. So in other words, if you're powering bandsaws or power tools from the back of the van, it means you don't have to take a separate generator with you. And I think that's a really neat touch and very, very handy. Now, from this single side door, your maximum load width is 1,300 millimetres with a maximum load height of 1,600 millimetres. I will say it is actually quite a step down from here. Thankfully there is a little bit of a step, and then obviously you've got the handle there. There is quite a drop down. Now the total volume in this particular van with this wheelbase and this height is 11 cubic metres, and its gross payload capacity is 960 kilograms. Now if you've watched our other van reviews on the channel, you will know that I've also driven the Mercedes-Benz e-Sprinter and the Fiat e-Ducato. And whilst I said that the e-Sprinter was a nice cabin in terms of its quality, it lacked any sort of like little niceties, it lacked any kind of creature comforts. Whereas the Fiat, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say it's one of the worst vehicles I've ever had the mispleasure of reviewing. And its cabin was, well frankly, I couldn't wait to get out of it. This, take note, van makers, is how you do the interior of a van in 2022. The Transit, the e-Transit, is simply a joy to spend your working day in. Let me start with the actual comfort of it, because you have this magnificent driver's seat which just holds you in the right place, and it's got enough length in the squab even for a little shorty like me, but there's so much range of adjustment. I've got height adjustment, I've obviously got fore and aft, backrest adjustment and tilt adjustment. There's a little wheel down here to give me tilt at front. The steering column as well adjusts for reach and for rake as well, so your driving position is more car-like than van-like. The wheel itself is a nice size. It's covered by, well, it's probably not going to be real leather, it's pleather I would suggest, which is practical, but it's nice to hold. That's a nice thing. It's got a nice kind of girth to it as well. Controls fall nice and easily to hand. You know, you've got the column stocks here for your indicators, and then your wipers obviously on this side. And I'll go into equipment levels in just a second with you, but let me just finish off on comfort. As well as that, you've obviously got a flip down armrest here that's adjustable for height, which is nice, and then the side of this door, the top of the door, is moulded so that you've got a nice armrest there as well. This is just a joy, this cabin. 2 passenger seats as well. Now they also flip up for storage, because underneath here is where you keep your cable bags. So they are located in there, so they're not having to be rolling around in the back or tied down to the side, the latching points in there. So that's excellent. Now in terms of storage as well, this is brilliant inside here. We've got great big door bins, which aren't too far of a stretch actually. You can reach the bottom of the door bin from the driver's seat and the passenger seat. They're also moulded to take slightly larger water bottles. Talking of which, you've got 2 big cup holders at the side of the dashboard, which will take my big coffee flask there. You've also got the centre flip down one as well, that you can put on a water bottle or another flask in there. You've got storage here, which will take something like, you know, like an iPad or notebook in there. You've also got storage across the top of the dashboard. There's 3 bins across the top of the dashboard, and also a little centre tray there as well for, say, sunglasses or whatever. Talking of which, there's also one down by your right knee, which is big enough for my sunglasses case, or again another sort of like water bottle. On this height van, you've also got storage above, so we've got a tray above the passenger and above the driver with 2 centre trays which are rubber lined as well, so things don't roll around. There's also a cubby hole in front of this passenger here, and there's also a decent sized glove box in there, so it is not lacking for storage at all. Let's move on to the actual cabin itself. So you start the van up, it's keyless start, so you've got the power button on the side here, so you power the whole thing up from there. And obviously the cabin is dominated by the standard fit Sync 4 infotainment system. Now, you know, the Mercedes-Benz Sprinter, you know, got a radio effectively, and that was it. You had to option up everything else. This Sync 4 system is standard, and that comes with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, which is wireless. I mean, that's phenomenal. The only thing it doesn't have is a wireless charging pad for your mobile, but I can forgive it that when the rest of it is as good as it is. But yeah, wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, standard fit. Everything's controlled through the Sync 4 system. Now, this is what we've seen before on the Mustang Mach-E. So, but instead of there, where it had that big kind of portrait screen, and here it's this landscape one. It's a 12-inch screen, and its clarity is brilliant. The only thing I would say, it would have been nice if it was slightly kind of angled more towards the driver, because a couple of times that I've been driving the van, you kind of have to kind of lean across just to see things. But I mean, I'm splitting hairs if I'm honest with you. The only other fault as well is that the heating and ventilation controls are controlled through the screen. You've got to go into the screen to control them. But they are always on, like they are in the Mustang, so you've got them always along the bottom of the screen to go into. Now, this is the trend trim level, so it's one up from base. I'll go through equipment levels a little bit later in the pricing section, but you do get things such as heated seats, heated windscreen, it's full climate control system. As I say, you get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, obviously Bluetooth for music streaming, and you know, and the system itself, if you're not using you know, Waze or Apple Maps or Google Maps, the actual Ford navigation system is good, and actually the screen responds very, very well. You know, I can't fault that at all. There's some shortcut buttons below, which are your drive mode buttons, which you can also access through the screen. We'll talk about those when we're driving. The maximum defrost. You can just shut the screen down on and off with that button there, and also there's a parking system button there. Steering wheel, as I mentioned, you've got multifunction steering wheel, so you've got cruise control and volume on the left hand side, and you've got track selection and your Bluetooth on your right hand side. You can also configure the driver instrumentation. Now, you've effectively got 4 dials here, so you've got a kind of power meter on the left where there would normally be a rev counter, speedo on the right, and then 2 smaller dials down the bottom, which again is like another power meter and a battery level indicator. As well as that battery level indicator, you also get a digital reader of the miles you've got left in the battery, so that's good, nice and easy to read at a glance. And then this little digital center display here you can configure depending obviously on what you want to see. So information about the efficiency of the van, or the you know, again, your miles to go to empty, or if you want to see what media is playing, or have a compass up, or different sort of like states of the electronics within the van, that can all be read from that center screen as well. This is your rotary transmission lever here. So you get park, reverse, neutral and drive, and then the centre button, which is marked L, oddly enough, I don't know why it's L, but that effectively activates your brake regeneration mode. Over on the right hand side by my knee, you've got the light switch, which is automatic lights on the trend level as well, and then you've got the mirror control, which is wonderful because it's the same mirror control that you used to get in a 1985 Ford Granada, which I absolutely love. It's still, I think, the best mirror control in the business. You just turn it to whichever one you use, and it's this joystick you just turn to adjust your mirrors. Brilliant, love that. Again, on the trend level, they're heated as well. They don't power fold, that's the only thing. That would have been quite handy to have as some power fold option. And then you've just got your electric window switches there, and then your door locking down there. Automatic hill hold button is down here, as well as an electronic park brake. In terms of, as I say, a cabin for a van, if this appeared on a car, on a Ford car, you would not be disappointed. The fact that it's on their van, it just makes it all the better. And as I say, if you spend your working day inside the cabin of a van, then as far as I'm concerned, I can't think of a better place to spend it than inside a Transit. It's that good. Now, whilst you have various different options when it comes to the Transit in terms of its style, its length and its body shape, there is just the one battery, and that's a 68 kilowatt hour one. Now, according to WLTP figures, that should give a range of up to about 156 miles, although Ford do say if you are more concentrated on inner city work, you could probably get up to almost 200 miles out of it. Charging speeds. It'll take charging speeds up to 115 kilowatts, meaning you can go for the usual benchmark of 15 to 80% in around about 34 minutes. So in other words, enough time for a coffee and a sandwich. If you're charging up overnight from a 7 kilowatt wall box, then that's going to take around about 11 hours. But that will drop to about 7.5 hours if you've got the use of an 11 kilowatt wall box. Now, the other thing to take into account with vans especially, if you're a fleet manager, is the app, the Ford Pro app, which will allow you, if you've got over 5 vans on your fleet, 5 Ford vans on your fleet, it will give you the ability to monitor those vans' efficiency, so you know about their downtime and what's working best for you through the Ford Pro app. So that's another thing to take into consideration when you're talking about the usability of the e-Transit. Now, for all the variations you can have the Transit in, as I say, there's only the one battery size, but you do have the option of 2 power ratings. You can either have a 184 PS model or a 269 PS model, and it's the former that I have here with 184 PS that I'm driving. I have to say, not at any point that I've had this van do I feel like I'm missing out and I should have had the higher powered one. Now, granted, I've not been carrying big heavy loads that, you know, so to say the normal kind of Transit customers may be carrying, but it doesn't feel like it needs any more power, if I'm being honest with you. It feels really nice to drive. Now, suspension setup is really interesting because if you've watched my Fiat e Ducato video, you'll know how awful that van was to drive, and this is another world away from that. You've got front suspension is McPherson struts with an anti-roll bar fitted, and at the rear it's an all-independent setup with semi-trailing arms and another anti-roll bar, and the van feels excellent on the road. Okay, you're not going to be going out hunting out any apexes with this thing, but even so, you still want a van that's nice to drive, and the Transit is really nice to drive. It's the best driving of the vans that we've tested on the channel so far by a country mile. The only downside that I can find with the way the van drives, there's 2 things that I've picked up on. The first is the steering is a tiny little bit vague. As I say, I know it's not meant to be a sports car, but there's a little bit of movement at the dead ahead on the wheel where the van doesn't respond. You've got slightly kind of vague steering there, which is slightly disappointing, especially from Ford, because the chassis engineers are some of the best that you're going to get. The other thing is the suspension. It's not uncomfortable, but it can be quite noisy over broken surfaces. There's a section of the M25 close to me that when I've been driving down, you hear the suspension working. You don't feel it. You know, as I say, it's very well, you're very well isolated from the bumps in terms of feeling them, but you can hear them. You can hear the patter of the suspension working. And that's the only 2 things that I can really fault with the way that the Transit drives. You've got different driving modes in it as well. I alluded to these earlier, so there's a little button down here, or you can access it through the screen, and depending obviously on what you want, normal's your kind of baseline, so you know, for standard everyday running around, that's absolutely fine, that's exactly what you want. Or there's eco, which you flip down into eco mode, and that will limit the power, and it will it will vary the torque settings as well, just to allow you to, you know, get the maximum range out of it. It also affects the climate control system as well, so it'll power back on that. And then your last one is slippery, and again, you know, out in the winter time, or maybe going onto a building site or something where you're going to have, you know, mud on the road or mud under the tires or whatever, and again it varies the power and the torque settings to allow you to be a little bit more deliberate with the throttle, but not allow it to sort of like spin its wheels. So very, very good, I have to say. 3 settings which actually, rather than sort of like eco, normal and power mode, just to have ones that actually make sense for a commercial vehicle. Now, in terms of driver assistance systems, that's the only other area where I feel it's slightly lacking. You've got some fitted to it, so depending obviously on the trim level and depending on the options that you have fitted, I mean, obviously this one's got cruise control, it's got lane departure, and it's got crosswind mitigation, I think, as well. But it doesn't have blind spot monitoring. Now, the mirrors are good. You've got good side mirrors on it, and you've got these secondary mirrors at the bottom, these kind of blind spot mirrors, which give you an excellent view back. But on a van of this price and quality, to have that extra little bit of a blind spot monitor, especially if you're driving in city where you've got cyclists coming up the inside of you, or Deliveroo riders, you know, in the little mopeds, that would be quite a nice handy thing to have. As I say, you can have cameras fitted to it as an option, but I think they should be standard. And that's the other thing as well. There isn't a reversing camera as standard. There's parking sensors, but this day and age, with electronics being sort of like, you know, as dare I suggest, cheap and easy to develop as they are, I'm sort of surprised it doesn't have a standard fit reversing camera. That'd be nice to see. Otherwise, I can't really fault this. The controls have a nice weight to them. Again, like some of the other cars that we've driven, there's a nice balance of weight between the throttle and the brake. Talking of brakes, you do have brake regeneration, but it's one level of it, and you get that by pressing this L button in the centre of this transmission dial here. So when you come off the throttle coming up to these traffic lights, yeah, it pretty much pulls it up to a halt actually. So you've got one pedal driving for your city and town work. And you've also got the auto hold function, which is down here as well. So you push that on, and obviously it just sort of like holds it on the brake for you, which is quite nice too. But otherwise, I'd say this is the best of the electric vehicles that we've driven in terms of, you know, the light commercial ones. I mean, there's going to be, and there's always going to be compromises when you have an electric vehicle that's been developed from a piston engined one. Of course you are. But there's very few compromises to be made that I can feel with this Transit. Certainly not when you consider how bad the likes of the e-Ducato was. The Mercedes Sprinter is a nice van to drive, there's no doubt about that. But this has the edge. This really does. This is a van you could just spend your working day in and be very, very comfortable. I mean, it just does everything that you expect a Transit to do, and that's the key. Ford aren't being radical with this, and they can't be radical with it, because you then have a situation where you could potentially alienate your core client base. You try and do something too radical. I understand the caution that they've done with this, and by being cautious and by just effectively electrifying the Transit, they've hit the nail on the head. This is still, in my opinion, the benchmark by which all others have to be judged when it comes to electric vans. So, good to drive, well equipped, practical. Catch has got to be here somewhere. It must be price. Not really. The range starts with the Leader trim at £48,000, and if you go for the trend model that this one is, with a couple of options that we've got fitted to this one, such as the paint finish, that's just over £53,000. Now those prices are before VAT, but also before the plug-in vehicle grant is taken into account. Now, whilst the government has done away with that when it comes to electric cars, it is still available on light commercial vehicles at the time of filming, and that's a maximum of £5,000 or 35% of the purchase price, whichever is the greater. So it's relatively competitive, because once you've taken that grant into account, the cost of this is probably only really about £5,000 more than its diesel engine equivalent Transit. But Ford reckon, through their research, that your running costs could be as much as 40% less with the electric Transit. Now, Ford aren't silly. They know that there are going to be some scenarios, and for some customers, where a diesel engine Transit is probably still the Transit of choice. But factor in those lower running costs allied to servicing, which will be less as well, because although it's still serviced every year, irrespective of mileage, there's not as much to really change on it, so your running costs are a lot lower. And you get a 3-year warranty, with the Ford as well. And as I say, remember, you've got access, if you run more than 5 Ford light commercials, you've got access to the Ford telematics app, so you can monitor the van's efficiencies and where, you know, your charging capabilities and what's going on when. So in terms of fleet management, cost-wise, the E-Transit is pretty much where you'd expect it to be. And of course, competition is going to come from those vans that we've mentioned before. So the Mercedes-Benz E-Sprinter that we've road tested, and the Fiat E-Ducato, and the rest of its Stellantis Group alliance partners. So the Peugeot Expert, the Vauxhall, Movano, and of course Citroen's Relay. But I have to say, having driven them both, neither really come up to the standard of the Transit. The other one that we have yet to test as well is the Maxus E-Deliver 9. So again, that's a good, that's quite a well recognised brand now that's coming in, and that does offer quite a competitive price to the Transit. So here's what we like and what we don't like about the new Ford E-Transit. We like its space, the different body styles and variations on offer, the standard Sync 4 infotainment system. It's good to drive, it's comfortable, the battery size, charging speeds and range capabilities, and the technology on offer to assist with running costs. We don't like the suspension is a little bit noisy over broken surfaces, slightly vague steering, and some of the safety systems are only available as an option. Ford may have taken their time bringing an electric Transit to market, which has meant that their competitors such as Mercedes-Benz and Stellantis Group have maybe got a little bit of a head start in the electric van market. But they've actually been very clever, because by taking their time, what it's meant that they've been able to do is they've been able to look at the core client base and what they want from an electric van. They don't want to be radical. They don't want to alienate that core client base. So there's no point bringing something out that might not work. What those core clients want is something that is good to drive, dependable, practical, efficient, and with low running costs. And that's exactly what the new Ford E-Transit delivers. Now, yes, we are about to see a new breed of electric light commercial vehicle come onto the market, such as those from Arrival and even Volkswagen with the ID Buzz Cargo. But until then, until those have proven themselves, if you want something that is practical, dependable, efficient, with low running costs, and you want to go all electric, not only is the new Ford E-Transit the most obvious choice, it's also the best choice. Thank you for watching another episode of AutoEV. As always, please remember to make sure that you're subscribed to the channel, and once you've done that, press the little bell button down below, because then you'll be notified of when our next video goes live. If you've enjoyed the video, if you've enjoyed the review, make sure you do give it a thumbs up and leave us some comments down below, good or bad. What do you think? Are we right? Is the Ford E-Transit the best electric commercial vehicle on the market, or are you waiting to see what these new breed of vans bring out? Remember, we're across all social media platforms as well, so Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Give us a follow there, because every little bit helps. And if you want to know more about AutoEV and you're desperate to waste away your afternoon just watching some more electric car reviews by a silly old Scotsman, then please remember to stick on our YouTube channel, because there's now well over 100 videos of car reviews, electric icons, van reviews, and even now motorbike reviews. All that remains for me to say is thank you once again for watching, and thank you for supporting the channel, and I'll see you again soon. So, you've watched our video. It's now my job to tell you to like and subscribe, and press the little bell button to receive notification of when our next video is uploaded.